everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Manga Wars, also known as Let's Give Callum Some Hate on Twitter and Instagram. But as you know, I'm a real glutton for punishment with this series. This series involves me looking at two popular but similar manga series and letting you know what my overall thoughts on them are. I score them on a variety of categories, so we have story, art, overall enjoyment, and then ending. Yeah, I look at which one I think is the best overall and let you guys know, and then I deal with the inevitable fallout from all of you who think that I'm wrong. So episode 2 was Berserk versus Vinland Saga, so if you haven't checked that out, I will leave a link somewhere within this video. But yeah, I had a really positive response from that video actually. I expected a lot more hate than I got, but I think that the topic for today's episode might cause more controversy than the previous one. So strap in and let's get started. So of course, if you follow me on Twitter, you will know what to expect, and likely I will have put it in the title of this video, so not really any surprise there, but we have My Hero Academia and Black Clover. So I want to say for the record, I enjoy both of these series for different reasons, so that's why we're going to dive into this. I'm going to break it down into sections, I'm going to score both the sections, and then we'll just look at it as in a more sort of constructive way, looking at it subjectively with all of the categories in mind. And that way, I think that's the fairest way to do it, rather than me just telling you off the bat what I think's good and what I think's bad. So starting off, we will start with story. So My Hero Academia, it centers around a young boy who lives in a world that is full of superheroes and supervillains. Everyone has what is called a quirk, otherwise known as a superpower, and he has actually been born without a power. And this is particularly painful for him because he aspires to be a hero. His favourite hero, All Might, his inspiration in life, he wants to be like him, and it's very difficult for him to come to terms with not having superpowers. So of course, in standard shonen fashion, he then somehow manages, without spoiling it, to get superpowers and get enrolled into a school for superheroes or wannabe superheroes, and then of course villains get involved and drama ensues. So I just want to say from the start that the storyline for My Hero Academia is quite uninspired, and it's not too original because I think we've been as a generation, we've been bombarded with superhero franchises since like the early 2000s, and I'm a little bit fed up of them, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be as well. But I think My Hero Academia, for a superhero franchise, is very good. The story is quite bog standard in the sense that you've got someone who has a goal to achieve. They want to be a superhero, but they don't have the powers, and it's very standard for shonen, but I am used to that. If they can pull it off in a good way, and it's quite creative along the way, and there's some interesting things to gain from it, then I'm all for it. I don't really need it to be too original, as long as it's entertaining. And the story, for the most part, is really entertaining in My Hero Academia, but I'd say for not the reasons that you're expecting. For me, I actually found the villains to be the most entertaining aspect of My Hero Academia. I think that there's the standard, you've got your standard tournament arc in the beginning, and all of your, you know, tropey kind of competitive leveling up sort of scenarios. So he's got a challenge to overcome, so he has to level up in a bit of a Dragon Ball syndrome before he can complete the task and move on to the next thing. But the villains and their actual motives are really, really cool. From what I've read, they're still shrouded in mystery. I still don't know a whole lot about them, what they're trying to achieve, and that is something that definitely pulls me through to continue reading this series. It's not so much that I want to know what's happening with the main characters in their day-to-day lives and how Deku can get stronger, and I don't really care for that. I've read so much of that, I'm not interested in that. It's the villains. I want to know why they are trying to destroy the city or kill All Might, and you know, it's that to me is interesting, and I think that the villains themselves are very creative, perhaps a little bit more so than the superheroes. That's another thing. I think that although it is a very tropey kind of stereotypical cliche series, I think the author does actually do a very good job at keeping it somewhat original. There's a lot of characters here on offer. It's kind of like the Avengers and the X-Men all rolled into one, but set to over 9,000. I think, you know, you've got a character for every single superpower that you can think of, and even weird ones that you wouldn't ever think of and only Japan would seemingly think of. And that keeps it fresh as well and really entertaining for the most part. Okay, so next I want to talk about Black Clover, and you will definitely see some similarities here. So Black Clover is set in a world of wizards and magic users, and it follows a young orphan named Asta who has no magical abilities. Now, we've already got a pretty serious trend here. You know, they've got superheroes, you've got wizards, and both of these characters have no powers. The difference being here is that Black Clover is more of a politically driven storyline. So it's got a lot of stuff to do with class systems, you know, the hierarchy, and Asta's ultimate goal isn't just to be a hero or a wizard. He wants to actually be the king of the wizards and, you know, get himself out of poverty and out of his lower class and into a better life. So of course, you've guessed it, Asta gets what is known as a grimoire, which grants him, to an extent, magical abilities, but his magical abilities are actually to nullify and break down other people's magic abilities. So that makes Asta's character really interesting to an extent, because he can nullify other magic users' abilities, and then essentially when they're in battle, their only kind of strengths are their own physical abilities and physical attributes and their drive to win the encounter. So overall, I think both the stories are really, really good at setting the groundwork for quite a good shonen series. Although it's not original and it's not really too creative to any extent, I think that they're both very good at what they do. They've definitely taken inspiration from other means. My Hero Academia is very inspired by, I would say, Marvel and DC Comics. And then Black Clover seems inspired by a lot of things. It's got a Naruto and fairy tale vibe to it. And I'm down for that. I really love it as long as it's done well. It feels like an homage to those series, and it's nice to know that the younger generations can enjoy series like those while they're, you know, going through their adolescence. So overall, I'm actually going to give both of these series a 6 out of 10 for storyline. So I have to say that I have only read the first 7 volumes of both. So don't be hating me in the comments and saying if you get to chapter whatever, then the latest chapter, then things really pick up and the story drastically changes, because I haven't got that far. I'm aware of what I have read, and what I've read, they are both very, very similar, but good by the same standards. So next up, you've guessed it, it's the art style. Now this is where the real controversy comes in, because art style is so subjective. So talking about it objectively, let's talk about what both series do really well in their art first. So My Hero Academia is really creative in its character design. There's a whole bunch of characters there. They've all got superpowers and they really feel like they're tailored to everyone. I feel like there's a superhero for everyone. And there's always a really creative kind of design for the villains as well. So one particular character that I actually really love, I don't know his name up to this point, but he is one of the villains and he is actually covered in hands. So you can't see his face. He's just got huge hands all around his face, and there's still an air of mystery about him as well. I don't really know entirely what his powers are, what his motives are, but I think his character design is really, really clever. It's that kind of mystery aspect that I really love about the character, and I just really want to know how deformed he is underneath those hands. So I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to as well. In terms of our main characters, I think some of the character designs are really, really cool. I really enjoy seeing how the character designs kind of tie in with their powers as well, because obviously some of their powers are related to physical attributes. So there's one particular character that can pull these sort of blobs off of his own head and they will stick to things. And I think that that's a really clever thing to do. I like the way that their physical attributes tie into their superpowers. Some of them definitely suffer from a little bit of underdevelopment. Like, I would enjoy less characters sometimes, but with more time for them to grow and more time to kind of see them in action. But there's a particular tournament arc in My Hero Academia that was really good in showcasing a lot of those characters that you hadn't really seen too much of before. But I just think the author might struggle later on down the line to really give everyone the time that they deserve because of the sheer number of characters that are in the series. Okay, next, I think Black Clover is in a similar position. So the author's very, very good at giving all of these characters their own unique abilities. But what I particularly love about the art is how creative the author is in terms of the magic. So each character has their own single type of magic that they specialize in, and this means that the battle scenes when they're drawn are actually really clever because they're not so much a Dragon Ball syndrome or a training aspect where they kind of build up their own physical powers. They're very much more so like Pokemon, where you've got your fire is good against grass, etc. One magic user might use light type magic, and that might be really powerful against someone who uses dark type magic. And I really like the contrast of that. I really like how fast paced those battle scenes can be. And there's a particular aspect of Black Clover early on where they will go on these side quests and they will visit these dungeons. And in the dungeons, there's a variety of traps and other magic users. And I really loved that as well. I thought that the way that those were drawn were really intriguing. I really wanted to know more about them. And it definitely reminded me to some extent of the early volumes of Maggie. So if anyone's ever read Maggie, that's another series with these dungeons and magical artifacts, and it felt very much like that, but for obvious reasons, in my opinion, slightly better. Okay, so next, some things that perhaps aren't so great. So one thing that I really actually like about Black Clover is the design of the world. I think that because it's set in a bit of historical setting, there's a bit more intrigue there, whereas My Hero Academia is just set in a modern day town that's been populated by superheroes, and I think they've kind of missed a trick there. I think they could have designed perhaps their houses and their buildings a bit more creatively to maybe accommodate some of these specific abilities. Like, I'd love to see a guy with the ability to be really huge come out of a really massive door of a massive house or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, just kind of use the environment to really develop the characters a bit more and show how the world has altered to accommodate some of these quirks. The next point that I have in terms of both series is that the character designs, although creative, are still clutching to stereotypes and cliches. Like, Asta looks like he's straight up Naruto crossed with Natsu from Fairy Tail, and they just had a baby and there's Asta. But that's not a bad thing. I've said it before. I really like the idea that these are up and coming and they're for the next generation, but I definitely think that there could be a little bit more to the protagonists in particular. I think if you're going to follow one specific character's journey, it shouldn't be the case that I actually prefer some of the side characters over that main character. I think the author should have really been a little bit more inventive with their main characters, but that's my only real gripe, and it's something that I definitely can look past. So overall, I think that the art style for both series is really, really solid. But I actually personally enjoy the art of Black Clover a little bit more. I think that it's a little bit better at the action scenes. I think things flow a little bit more fluid. And sometimes in My Hero Academia, I thought it was a little bit clunky how it did things, and it felt a little bit rushed. Whereas Black Clover can be a little bit more creative at times with the use of magic versus the use of powers in My Hero Academia. So for that reason, I'm going to give My Hero Academia a 6 out of 10 for art and Black Clover narrowly better with a 7 out of 10. So next up, I would normally talk about the ending of these series, but they are both still ongoing. So instead of that, I'm going to talk about the first volumes. So a first volume, as I've said before, is hugely important. It really needs to set the story up in a good way that makes you want to continue to read and makes you really interested about what is on offer from these characters. And yeah, just quickly, all I really have to say about the first volumes for these is they're both very similar. I've looked through them both again before creating this video, and they both have very similar kind of layouts. For example, My Hero Academia, it initially sets up the world, it sets up the motives of the main character, it sets up the trials and tribulations that they face in the fact that they have no powers, and then it gets to the point where they gain their powers, and then it sets you up in the school environment for which they're going to presumably learn new things about their abilities and grow as a character. If you look at the first volume of Black Clover, you will no doubtedly see that there are huge similarities in the first volume as well. It starts off with the world, it shows you a little bit about the class system and what the character's up against, how the character has no magical abilities, and then by the end of the volume, they've gained their magical abilities, they've got their place within a team as part of the Magic Knights, and they are then set up to develop again as a character and presumably gain more abilities and learn more about themselves. So I was actually surprised flicking back through these how much stuff happens in the first volume, how many characters are introduced, and I think that that's a positive and a negative for this series. So I've said it before, there's so many characters for both, but they both don't really kind of give those characters quite enough time. All in all, however, I think I'm going to give both of these series an 8 out of 10 for their first volumes, purely because of how much content is really crammed into there. You learn so much about both worlds, both characters, a lot of side characters, all from the first volumes. There's a lot of backstory, there's a lot of motivational stuff going on there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt like even though I could see the tropes, I could see the stereotypes, they still felt fresh, they still felt exciting and new, and I can only imagine what that's like for someone who's reading these for the first time. Okay, so finally comes the last category, and that's my overall enjoyment. So I've probably mentioned a lot of my points throughout this video, but just to summarize, let's start with My Hero Academia. For the most part, I really enjoyed My Hero Academia up to about volume 5 or 6. So after the tournament arc had ended, I felt like there was a huge lull in the storyline. I felt like it didn't really engage me all that much. And like I said, there's a lot of characters on display, but I don't really tend to care about them all that much. I don't know anything about a lot of them. I don't know why. I know for sure why Deku wants to be a hero, but I don't really know a lot about the other guys and what motivates them. And I think it just really sort of doesn't utilize those characters to their fullest extent. I've been debating for a long time as to whether I'm going to continue the series. I definitely want to get to the point where I know more about the guy with the hands over his face. I want to know what his motives are and who he is, but if that doesn't really engage me all that much when I get to it, then I can definitely see myself selling this series on. But as I said, I don't think there's enough depth to this series. I don't really think it warrants all the hype that it gets sometimes, because I just don't really kind of care all that much. So next, Black Clover. Similarly, there's a lot of stuff in there that I have seen a million times, but the one thing that keeps me going with Black Clover more than My Hero Academia is the art. I actually really love the character designs. I think the art style for me, I personally enjoy a lot more than My Hero Academia. And I think there's a lot more depth to Black Clover than people give it credit for. So I think a lot of people saw it and initially wrote it off as a Naruto clone, and the anime was very, very poor. So the anime for My Hero Academia did hugely well, and the Black Clover one was terrible because of the voice acting, and I know it's really hard to get past that. But if you read the manga rather than watch the anime, I think you'll find that it's much more engaging, and there's a lot more depth to it than people give it credit. And that's another thing that I haven't mentioned that I think is really fresh in this series, is that you're used to seeing a character that has no ability slowly build their abilities as they progress, and then people gain more respect for them. Aster has those abilities from the beginning. Yeah, sure, he doesn't have magic, but his anti-magic powers make him hugely powerful. Like, he's kind of overpowered. I haven't seen him lose a battle thus far in the series, and that's just a breath of fresh air because it's not his abilities that people judge him on. It's his class, it's his rank, and they just dismiss him from the get-go. So I think that that definitely gives Black Clover so much more to kind of appreciate from a storyline perspective than My Hero Academia. So yeah, overall, both fantastic series, really action-packed, both very good at what they do to an extent, but in terms of my personal enjoyment, I definitely prefer the magical elements over the superhero elements, and I really like the world building a little bit more in Black Clover than My Hero Academia. So for that reason, My Hero Academia I'm giving a 5 out of 10 for overall enjoyment, because to me it was just average. I'll take it or leave it. And Black Clover is actually my personal new favourite Shonen Jump series, and for that reason I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 for personal enjoyment. So yeah, let the carnage commence in the comments. So yeah, as you can see from both the scores, Black Clover is the clear winner between the two. So don't hate me too much for this. I know a lot of you will definitely disagree, because Black Clover has definitely taken a lot of hate from the moment that it came out. I know there's a few of you that might agree with me. Definitely those that have read the manga over the anime will likely agree with me, possibly. But I'm just one of those people who can't really understand the hype for My Hero Academia. I think that it's just very cliche, it's very bog standard. Superheroes don't interest me all that much, and I picked it up mostly because of the hype and mostly because of everyone telling me how good it was, and I can appreciate why it's so good. So if you haven't seen my video that I created already of why My Hero Academia is so popular, then I'll leave a link somewhere for you to go and check that out, where I definitely break down all the reasons that I think it's popular. But if you're just talking my personal opinion, I don't really enjoy it all that much. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I really hope it hasn't made you too angry watching it. So please look forward to the next episode of Manga Wars. If you have any suggestions for series you'd like to see me compare for the next one, then please comment down below. And until then, stay awesome.